That being said, go ahead and get out your bulletins and open up to the notes there. We're going to be talking and continuing our series called One Question That Changes Everything. And I hope this series has changed a lot of your perspective in life. In fact, I hope this series has changed a lot of ways that you view every invitation you have, every opportunity that comes your way, and every chance that you have to make a decision or you have a choice of direction to make. I hope that this question that we've been talking about as the one question that changes everything has really changed your perspective in a lot of things. And that question's been this. It's, what is the wise thing to do? You can write that in. It's a serious big idea that we've been talking about, and hopefully in this, as we've looked at this, you've grappled with this, you've wrestled with this in many different areas of your life. And one of the things that we've said throughout the series is that we owe it to ourselves to know what the wise thing is. You owe it to yourself. You owe it to your future you owe it to the you want to be, you owe it to you to ask this question and at least know what the wise thing to do is. And it's not just you that you owe it to. You owe this to your spouse to know what the wise thing to do is. You owe it to your kids. You owe it to those around you who are closest to you, who love you and you love them. You owe it to at least know what the wise thing to do is. But in this series, we've not just been talking about knowing what's wise. See, it's easy to know what's wise. In fact, finding the wisdom is easy. And we talked about how last week we walk with the wise and we'll become wise, so we need to have the people around us to gather the wisdom we need. That's why life groups are such an important thing in our culture here, in our community. That's why we encourage you to not live without a Jesus-centered community around you, because it's through that we gain wisdom. And it's through that, so we ask you, who do you need to walk with? But also in this, it's not just knowing what's wise, it's doing it. So throughout this series, we've been praying, Jesus, will you give me the wisdom to know what to do and give me the courage to do it? And today, we're going to be talking about a very, very crucial topic that is our time. And the reason that we're going to be talking about time today is this, and it's a fill in the blank that I want you to write down next, is my life is made up of my time. Your life is equal to your time. When you run out of time, you have run out of life. And not to be the Debbie Downer today, but today I want us to have a stark, clear, painfully clear, if so, reality that our life is made up of our time. And how we spend our time will determine everything. In fact, write this in your notes. What I make of my life is determined by how I invest my time. How you and I invest our time will determine what we make of our life. I don't know if you've ever been to a funeral or if you've ever thought about what you want people to say at your funeral. But when you think about that the obituary that's said, or the what they read in your eulogy, and what they're going to say about you as they stand around you when you're gone, and you wonder what they're going to say, you and I have been in areas where we've heard people say, well, they made the most of their life. They had a great life. And the reason that people say that about people is because how they used their time. And what you do with your time will determine what you make of your life. How you spend your time. Isn't that interesting how we use that word spend? We use it almost like it's a resource. It's something that we use to get in exchange for something else. And that's a reality. See, time is something we have to invest. It is something we have to steward. And write this in. See, time is the only resource that we can't get more of. And we can't completely control how much we will have. You can get more friends. You can lose friends and you can replace friends. You can get more money. You can lose money in an investment and you can get more of it. You can get another car after your other car bites the dust. And you can restore it. And you can recover from losing a sale in the job, or you can recover from a bad project gone wrong at work, but you cannot recover lost time. Have you ever asked the question, where did the time go? I know I have. You just get in the craziness of life and you just think back, where did the time go? And the answer to that question is just that. It's gone. Because when time passes, you can't get it back. As parents, have you ever thought about, I know Cassie and I have thought this, what did we do with our time before we had kids? Because you think about, man, we have to optimize all of this to get all this production out, and we look back at our life before kids, and I go, what did we do with our time before kids? And especially as a parent, when you think about all the time that it goes by with your kids, have you ever heard that statement that my wife and I have adopted that says, hey, the days are long, but the years are short. See, time is a resource to us. And the biblical writers, in the Old Testament specifically, they understood something about time, and they tried to communicate the value of time and how God sees our time here on earth. And there are a couple scriptures that I want us to look at today to give us this statement, give us this understanding that we can come around through what God sees as our time and what these Old Testament authors saw of as our time on earth and what we need to make of it and how it leads us to wisdom. The writer of Job, who tells the story of Job and quotes Job here, he writes this in Job chapter 14. He says, a person's days are determined. A person's days are determined. That word determined in the Greek, in the Hebrew language, is almost like they're fixed. They're set. They can't be changed. He says, a person's days are determined. You have decreed the number of his months and set limits he cannot exceed. We can't control how much time we have on this earth. While it's limited in our control, we can take care of ourselves, we can go to the doctor, we can get medicine, we can use the wisdom around us for natural things, but you can't control how long on this earth you're going to be. You can't control how long you're going to have with your kids. You can't control how long you're going to have with those relationships around you. And there is a limit that you cannot exceed. See, you can exceed the speed limit and be okay. You can exceed your budget and recover from it. You can exceed what you should eat in a day and bounce back. But you cannot exceed the limit of your life. You can't overlive. You can overspend, you can overeat, you can overwork, but you cannot overlive. The psalmist wrote this in Psalm 39, and I'm so grateful we have this recorded in Scripture because we find some gravity in this. He says, show me, Lord, my life's end and the number of my days. Let me know how fleeting my life is. So Jesus, will you show me that my life is coming to an end and that my life is short, that it's shorter than I really want it to be and what I expect it to be. May I realize how fleeting, how like a vapor it is. And since time is running out, we need the wisdom on how to invest our time. And the psalmist wrote how seeing our time leads us to wisdom when he wrote what we have is Psalm 90, verse 12. Read this with me. It says, teach us to number our days. Why? So that we may gain a heart of wisdom. Time is a resource that we're to steward wisely. And beginning to wisely steward our time begins by numbering our days, knowing how long we have to live. Understanding that while we may not have an understanding of the number of days, but we need to learn that our life is fleeting and it's coming to an end. So, in practice, and to help us practically live this out, we're going to number our days together. And so if the life expectancy of most people in America is 80 years old, and this is a generous thing, 78 point some years, we're going to round up to 80 just because it makes my math easy. And so in this, if you're 20 years old, well, first of all, do you guys want to know this in weeks or months? Somebody vote for everybody. Months, that'll be a lot easier. Here we go. So numbering your days in months. If you're 20 years old, you have 60 years of life. You know how many months you have? 720 months of life left if you live to be 80. If you're 35 years old, you have 540 months of life left. If you are 50 years old, you have 360 months of life. And if you're 65 years old, you ready for this? No. You have 180 months of life left. Do you feel the weight? You know what that weight is? Wisdom. Teach me to number my days that I may gain a heart of wisdom. You have a limited amount of time that you cannot exceed. And we become wiser when we understand our time on earth is limited. You can write that in. You and I gain wisdom. We become wiser when we realize and understand that our time on earth is limited. I wrote this in my notes, this just as a side note, that living life with the end in mind makes us wisely invest our time. When you live your life knowing that your life is coming to an end, and you might have the rest of your life ahead of you the younger you are, but the reality is you don't know when your milk carton's going to expire. You don't know when your time is going to run out. And so in this, we need to look at our time and invest our time wisely. And to help us do this, I want to give you 4 observations about time. These aren't mind-blowing observations. These are pretty practical, simple, and you probably could have come up with these on your own. But I came up with these and formed these by the help of Andy Stanley, who wrote the book that we've kind of taken as the premise for this series. His book, Ask It, he talks about 4 observations of time. I've used those and kind of made my own out of those to kind of fit today's teaching. So these are inspired by his observations. And here's the first observation, it's this. And this is the most important one of them all. It kind of sets them all up and kind of is the overarching principle in this. And this is it right here. See, consistent deposits of time over time is cumulative. This is important to know. No matter where you are in your life, what season you are, if you're a Christ follower, if you consider yourself religious or not, consistent amounts of time, consistent deposits of time over time are cumulative. What do I mean by that? By small, consistent investments of your time into what you consider is important for a period of time accumulates value over time. It's easiest to see, it's more easily seen in exercise. You've heard them say, 30 minutes a day of exercise over time will add years to your life. It's true. See, you can add to your life and you can add value to your life and you can exercise. And it's easy to see that when we do small chunks of exercise a day, that over time it's cumulative. It adds to your health. You can eat right for consistently, and you eat right, and it'll add value to your life. But it's not just easy to see in our health. This works with our relationship with God. That those consistent deposits of time over time, that as you come to church weekly and as you are in a life group and as you read your Bible and you pray and you study, those deposits of time over time, they accumulate and add value to the life that God is developing with you in a relationship with Him. And it doesn't just involve a relationship with God. It involves our relationship with our spouse. That those consistent deposits of time, date nights, consistently going to bed together at the same time as much as you can, that those opportunities to talk, to engage, those consistent deposits of time over time, it accumulates. It compounds interest in your relationship with your kids. The consistent deposits of time over time is cumulative. The more nights that you can eat dinner together as a family, it can add value to that. Now, here's the reality, is one installment of time doesn't really help that much. See, one installment of time is not that helpful, nor is it hurtful. That if you miss an installment, that if you're exercising regularly and you miss an installment, it's not going to hurt that much. But it's the consistent that's cumulative. So just as much as consistently depositing your time into something that's important over time will accumulate value, this opposite is true. Neglect is cumulative. Neglect is cumulative. You neglect your health, And that will accumulate an effect of neglect in your life. See, neglecting your spouse over time will have a cumulative effect in your relationship with your spouse. Neglecting your kids will have a accumulating effect in your relationship with your kids. Neglect has a cumulative effect. Now, here's the thing about neglect, is neglect is easy. In fact, neglect is the path of least resistance. But the thing about neglect is neglect will cost you more. Neglect will cost you more than all those deposits of time that you can make along the way to create a healthy relationship, healthy you. See, neglect is cumulative. And here's another thing, is random has no long-term value. There is no compounded value in the random things we opt for over the important things. Now, these are the things that we think are urgent in life, that randomly come in and distract us and displace or interrupt what we are doing and investing in important things in life. So what if I had two scales up here? And the way I'll just kind of illustrate this. For those of you who are married, and for those of you who are married, what if in one scale we placed all the value and all the things that you did that add value to your relationship with your spouse by simply, let's just use a date night. And it doesn't have to be an elaborate thing, but just consistent time, weekly, monthly, that you're just spending with your spouse. And what about how you can invest in that relationship? And over time, you know what that's going to do? That's going to have a cumulative value to your relationship. And if you put in the other side of the scale, all those random things that you allow to interrupt that date night plan, or all those little things, those calls, those urgent requests that you say, that you give lead in, that you allow to interrupt that important thing. And I would say, hey, write those in and put that over here. First of all, if it were me, I wouldn't know what to write down because I can't remember what those things were. I mean, really, what was it that interrupted that? What took away from that time? What was the value in that? See, the random has no value. If you value random, you know what you get? Random. There's no value, long-term value in random. If in your relationship with God, all those times that you could be reading scripture or praying and developing your faith and coming on a Sunday or in the life group, and you invest and you think about all those opportunities that stole that time away from you and was competing against that, and you think, what did I do instead of that? So where's the value? What is it? What did that lead to? What did that add value to? And not much. See, it's random has no long-term value. And that leads to this fourth observation is I can't make up for lost time in the areas that are most important. You just can't make up for lost time. You can't pull the all-nighter. You can't cram for that test. You can't pull an all-nighter for your marriage. You can't say, okay, you know what, after months and years of neglect, hey, let's go on a 2-day retreat and we'll cram it all in. You can't do it. You can't make up for lost time in the relationship with your kids. You can't say, okay, guys, we're going to go on a 3-week vacation, and everything that we haven't been able to do as a family over the last 3 years, we're going to pack it all in this 3 weeks, and it's going to be fun. To everybody that's ever tried that, it's miserable. See, you can't make up for the time of neglect. You can't cram it in. You can't make up for the lost time that's truly lost. And it's also true with our faith. You can't neglect your faith and make it up. You can't neglect your faith over years. And I've talked to people all the time that they used to go to church as a kid, or they grew up in a youth group, they go off to college, they go their own way, they're kind of, they're persuaded in a different belief set, they pursue that. Then all of a sudden a crisis hits their life. And in that crisis, they try to cram. They try to get everything in their life to make up for the neglect over the years. And the reality is spiritual maturity is just that. It's maturity. You can't microwave maturity. You can't microwave your relationship with God. And it takes time, over time, consistently depositing time into what matters most. And that's why I believe the scripture that Paul writes to the church in Ephesus is so important to our life. Because we can't make up the time we've lost. And we can't know how much time we have left. And while we have less time now than what we did yesterday, we can make the most of that time. And that's what Paul says. He creates this urgency in the reader's hearts, I believe, when he writes these words. He says, be very careful then. In light of all this, and in fact, I'm leading it in with, in light of everything I've told you about time, in light of everything you know about your life, be very careful then how you live. Not as unwise, but as wise. And then he says, making the most of every opportunity. Why? Because the days, they're evil. And that word, making the most of every opportunity, that phrase there, is a transactional phrase that he uses. It's actually one word that gives a financial accounting term that means redeem. He's saying, make the most out of this. Get the full value out of what you put into your time. Get as much out of your time as you can. Make the most out of it. He's putting this urgency in his readers, and so he's putting this urgency in our hearts to get the full value out of our time. Why? Because the days are evil. Because culture is out there. And you know what culture wants to do, I believe? Culture wants to destroy your time. Culture wants you to waste your time. If you spend your time the way culture wants you to spend your time, you will waste your time. And I believe culture is one of the ways that the enemy distracts us. And I believe one of the ways the enemy destroys us, because if he can get you distracted from what's important, he can destroy the things that are most important in your life. And when we allow ourselves to stop thinking about what's important, and we get our eyes off of that, and we get our eyes on the now and what culture wants us to say now and do now, and forget looking forward to the future, and forget how our time has a cumulative effect and what we invested in, we waste our time. And if we waste our time, we will waste that part of our life. If you waste your time, you wasted that part of your life. If we don't guard our time, culture will influence us to carelessly spend our time. So, while one time won't matter, what it can lead to will matter. So we need to invest our time in what I believe matters most, and not let the enemy trick us. Because I believe the enemy's way of tricking us is by distracting us. And the way I believe the enemy distracts us from investing our time in the things that are most important is by making us busy. That we get so busy that we don't even have the mental time to think about what matters most in our life. That we're operating from crisis of one event to we have school events over here to all this over here, and we got responsibilities over here, and we have no margin to identify what's the most important in our life. And we can begin to identify and gain wisdom by first numbering our days, understanding that our time on earth is limited. And when we do that, we can make some space saying, okay, I need to identify what matters most. And then I need to invest my life, AKA my time, into what matters most, which is today's teaching big idea. Write this in. See, I am wise when I make the most of my time by investing my time in what matters most. You will be wise when you make the most of your time by investing your time in what matters most. So we need to identify then what is the most important. Then we need to put our time into the things and the who's in our life and the people in our life who are most important. important. And there are two simple principles I want to leave you with today. First is this: prioritize who before what. Prioritize who before what. Now, in just this idea of priorities, there's a concept here that I want you to grab. You can't have multiple priorities. You honestly just can't. There's no way that two things can share priority. There's no possible way. In the definition of itself, there is only one thing that can sit at the top. And I believe that when we put the right thing as the priority of our life, everything else and everyone else falls into their proper rank. And you go, Casey, I expect you to say Jesus. And you're right. I believe when we make Jesus the priority of our life, everything in your life falls into its proper rank. When you make Jesus the priority of your life, then your marriage will have the proper priority. When you put Jesus as your priority in your life and you follow him and you put him first in your life and you make him the priority, that you want to seek him in his kingdom and you want his reign on your life, then your kids are going to find their proper rank. Then your career is going to find its proper rank. Then your hobbies are going to find their proper rank. And everything in life will kind of find its rank. But you've got to identify the one true priority. And when Jesus becomes the who before anything we do, then everything else finds its proper place. That's why I believe Jesus was, when he said, seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, it wasn't just to apply to our money. It wasn't just to apply to our worry. It was something to prioritize every area of our life, that when we put him first, when we seek him first and his reign on our life, everything finds its place. So prioritize who before what? Prioritize the people around you. Think about the relationships you have. Husbands and wives, you need to prioritize your relationship before anything else. You need to prioritize that over a career. You need to prioritize that over a hobby or a dream vacation or a bucket list. You need to prioritize your relationship with each other over your kids. In fact, the best gift that you can give your kids is a marriage that is healthy. It's the best gift you can give them. So you need to prioritize Jesus personally, and Jesus needs to be the center of your marriage, and then Jesus will be the center of your family. Prioritize who over what. And the second thing is this, is don't let what's urgent displace who's important. For those who have read the late Stephen Covey's book, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, you'll remember that he talks about quadrant 2. And quadrant 2 in his book are those things in our life, as he charts out those things in our life that are urgent and those things in our life that are important. And he said, hey, if you want to make the most of your time, you want to make the most of your life. You want to live and be effective in life. He says you need to learn to live in quadrant 2, which are the things that are not urgent but highly important. And when we live our life, by pursuing the things that are important and not allowing the crisis, the urgent things to interrupt and displace and push out the who's in our life that are important. That sales call that is just at the right time, and if it means a whole weekend away, maybe it's wise to not allow that to displace the who's and important in your life. Maybe it's whatever the situation is in your life that might be urgent right now and demanding your time, because culture's always going to demand your time. Things are going to always demand your time, but you can control who gets your time and what gets your time. And don't let the urgent things in life displace the who's who are important in your life. Don't let the urgent displace your time with God. Don't let the urgent displace your time with your wife and your spouse or your husband. Don't let the urgent displace your time with your kids. And don't let the urgent displace your time with the who's that are important in your life. And so to help you do this, we need to put this question through the grid that we've been talking about. And that's this. In light of my past experiences, current situations, and future hopes and dreams, where do I need to make daily deposits of time? And I'm going to give you 4 areas to consider. And they're actually ordered in what I would consider a rank. And that's first one is spiritually. What daily deposits of time do you need to add to your faith and your relationship with God? That's why Sundays are so important, because I believe this is a daily investment in your relationship with God. I believe that your prayer life is important. And you might say, I don't even know where to pray. Just start talking to God like he's right on the phone with you. But those daily deposits, it's not doing a long thing. It's just small investments of time over time have accumulating value in your life. You might have, in my life, people have asked, Casey, what's one of the things that has added most value to your life? And I would tell you, hands down, the thing that has shaped my character, the thing that has enabled me to be a better husband, the thing that has enabled me to be a better dad, and enabled me to be a better pastor, and really has shaped every area of my life and the different skills that I've even developed. It's not been a book that I bought at Barnes & Noble or on my Kindle. It's not been a class that I attended. It wasn't a college seminary or anything like that. It wasn't a degree or anything like that. You know what has the single most value that's added up over time? Is that since the age of 16 years old, I have every year read the Bible all the way through. And you go, really, that's it? Yeah. Because the consistent daily deposits of my relationship with God, as I read the scripture and get the revelation of who he is, and I apply it to my life, and I let that live out, and I let it search me, over time, that has created the character of Jesus in me. And not to elevate me as a person, but to elevate the discipline of creating a daily deposit of time. Because over time, that accumulates value in my life. Another area is relationally. What about a relationship with your wife or your spouse? Those deposits, consistent daily deposits of time, this is why I try to go to bed at the same time as my wife as often as we can. We try to make this a habit. Why? Because it just opens up conversation. And you can get so busy and one person has to work late, and I understand that there's situations in life, but that consistent process over time, date night with your spouse, it doesn't have to be elaborate. It could just be for a walk. It could just be taking time consistently to engage with your spouse, that you can relationally develop that. And over time, that's going to accumulate value for your life. What about your kids? You know, having dinner together with your family at least 3 to 4 times a week. At our house right now in this season of life, I make it a priority at least 6 times. My goal is 7, that I eat dinner every day with my family. Why? Do we have amazing conversations? No. It's pulling their teeth sometimes. But I know that over time, that will be valuable. Putting my kids to bed is important to me, because I know that over time, this is going to have a valuable, and one day my girl's going to go off to high school. And I know that that's going to have accumulating a value over time that will be invested in that. In my kids, I'm going to invest in them over time, relationally. Who do you need to invest in daily, weekly, monthly? And then thirdly, personally. What about your health, physically? What can you do daily to put deposits of time that over time, personally, you'll be better? Emotionally, how can you do daily deposits of time into your emotional health, into your mental health, that you can consistently become, and you can put daily deposits of time that will accumulate value in your life? And the last is professionally. I couldn't leave it out, because this is a part of our life that the more you optimize your time, the more you sharpen this saw, the more time you're going to have to invest in the things that are most important. See, our careers enable us, and we need to become better at what we do so we can invest our time and steward it appropriately. So, in your life, we are wise, and you are wise by making the most of every opportunity. And we are wise when we are investing our time in what matters most.